And there's no chocolate milk in the drinking fountains and other things, by Mary Hokana. Friday at 10:30. I guess we'll get started. My name is Mary Hokana, and I know everybody likes this. I credit the name to my husband. My husband came up with it, and then I just wrote the description off of that. Who I am is my husband served in the military for 26 years as an Army chaplain, so we moved around a lot. The last 3 positions he had were all in Texas. So I stayed in San Antonio. I worked for the Air Force for 5 years as he finished up his career in the military. So for the Air Force, I worked in standards and evaluation, and 2 things happened in Texas. I am a Concordia Bronxville grad in business education, so I did that, wherever we could. I have a master's degree from University of Oklahoma in adult education. I have a master's degree from Purdue in learning design and technology. So the Purdue degree happened in Texas. And I worked for standards and evaluation for the Air Force. What that means is my boss did the compliance part, and I did the whole evaluation part, surveys, comment sheets, all those kinds of programs. So that's where I really got a lot of my experience. Our organization at one point, everybody was sending out surveys outside our organization. And then when I sent one out and we were the official department, people would say, well, we just filled out a survey 2 months ago from you guys. What's up? So then all the surveys came to us, and it really helped me develop my thinking about survey writing and how you need to think about making surveys. Now, the only thing we're really going to talk about today is how you get answers. How many of you have written surveys and you get an answer, you go, where did that answer come from? Right? And you think, well, that really wasn't what I was asking. So I'm going to show you how to kind of write some of your questions so that you can get a more, maybe an answer that's more in line with what you're looking for. Okay. So you write, how many of you write surveys for your church or for your school? Pretty much everyone? And do you get answers that you're baffled by? Okay, so we're going to talk about getting the right feedback. How many of you answer surveys? You know you don't. That's my husband. He gets a survey and hands them off to me. And when I get particularly good customer service on the phone, I will tell the person, because I say, I know that people complain. If I'm going to complain about people, I will go out of my way to compliment people when they do something right. So why do you do surveys? When you fill them out, why do you fill them out? Yes, sir.
I recently filled out a survey on an app that I'm using.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something about there was a feature missing from the app that I thought was really important for my use of it. And so when I got a survey and they asked for input, the reason I took the survey was so that I could give them feedback about the feature I wanted in the app, hoping that maybe someday they would listen.
So it was a very specific.
Yes.
Do you normally fill out a lot of surveys?
At least occasionally, if it's something that I think is going to be helpful,
Mm-hmm.
and it depends who the survey comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to help that organization, then I'll definitely fill out the survey.
Mm-hmm.
But for years I filled out the consumer report survey, so I guess I'm a survey taker.
I think it has to do with having your voice heard, whether it's the good news or the bad news,
Mhm.
or a mixture.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know,
So you fill them out and you give your opinion then? Or
I do not 100% of the surveys I get. It
Mhm.
really depends on time, but
Mhm.
if I can, I do.
Okay. Anybody else?
Quick one.
Okay.
Quick one.
A quick one.
Yeah. Quick question maybe for something.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I used to fill it out more than I do now because they're so prevalent every time your voicemail or, the doctor's offices, everybody's overdoing surveys and it's almost like, get the whole thing, not just.
Oh, I absolutely. My personal philosophy is, I talked about our organization. We would have people come into our office and say, "Oh, we got to do a survey." I said, "What do you want to do a survey on?" "I don't know, but my boss said we need a survey." So not that we needed to develop another form, but we developed another form so that it would make them think about why they needed one. But you're absolutely right. I find the same thing too. After the phone call, please stay on the line for the survey. There's one that I won't even do anymore. It's the Wall Street Journal. We get it delivered to our house, and sometimes we're in and out, and we had some problems. And the first question is, did the customer service representative solve your problem? Well, I don't know, because it sounded like they solved my problem, but I don't know because I won't know until tomorrow, or if I look at my account. So I don't even do that one, and I've told them, you've done a great job, but I won't fill it out because this. So anyway, so we know, so I think we're getting an idea of why we do surveys, and the whole thing about whether people listen, we're going to talk about that as well. So I have three people basically in my head when I do a survey. I do them all the time. I do them for Ministry to the Armed Forces when they do their training. I do them, the Missouri Pastor Wives Retreat. I started helping Kathy Chinberg out with that this past year. So I'm doing them all the time. I don't charge. This is kind of what I love to do. First, okay, so I'm putting my bibliography up front, so if you want to take a picture, you can do that. First one is Kirkpatrick Training Evaluation Model. I don't know if any of you have heard of them. They've been around since the 50s. I use the New World Model, and I'll show you how that has changed. Kirkpatrick Partners, you can get on there. You can have an account for nothing. So if you want to know where they're coming from, if you have an interest in that. Second one is Dr. Matthew Champagne. I think he's a psychometrician. His quest in life right now is to have good surveys. The survey playbook, I'm not going to pull out all his philosophies. He has a lot of good ideas, and I implement almost all of them. And he's also very, very approachable. And then my own experiences. So this is the training evaluation, Kirkpatrick's. This is the 1950s version. So they were going from results, but they were doing reaction first. So they come up with the surveys, then they come up with a test, then they come up with the behaviors, and then they end up with some kind of results. It was just something in the 1950s that filled a niche. What they've done now is they start with results. So before they even, the whole idea is before you have training, you decide where you want to end up with. What changes do you expect to have? Like one example, or two examples I throw at churches is confirmation. Do you just want to teach the faith, or do you want something more? Like, do you want, is the result that you want, do you want those confirmands in church in their 20s and 30s? Okay, so that's an example of a result. Or Vacation Bible School. What do you expect to see out of Vacation Bible School? Not necessarily at the end of the week, but maybe 3 months down the line, or even next Sunday. So what results do you expect to get? So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but so I'm results driven. So whenever I write a survey, I'm always thinking about the results that we want to see. Is that clear? Has anybody seen this before?
Like your outputs first, so
Yep.
figure out what you want.
And this is the hardest part right there, is the behaviors. I'm gold certified in Kirkpatrick's model, and part of that is you come up with a plan and then you have to implement it. And it's really hard. Jim Kirkpatrick likens it to going up a mountain. And so, and then you have all these places where you stop, camps along the way. So you get to a camp, and so that's a behavior that you're going to reach. And then what's the next behavior you need to work toward, kind of thing, and so on. If you go on their site, they have lots and lots of stuff about it. The survey playbook, I only pulled out 3 things. He has about 9 major points and then several under each one. He wants to make better surveys. Surveys are a conversation. I was talking to someone, and they thought that they would verbally talk with somebody back and forth as a conversation. What I mean by that, and what Matt Champagne means, is you need to respond. So you give somebody a survey, they tell you what they think. Well, are you going to do anything with it? If you don't do anything with it, and this is part of the reason why people don't fill them out, is they don't see any change. If people see change, now you've told the person who filled it out, hey, they're listening to what I said. When you send out another survey, chances are better that you're going to get a better return the next time, because people will understand that changes are happening, they are listening to what I am saying, and then and so you have, again, that conversation. And one thing here, don't ask something you either can't or you won't change. For me, well, because it doesn't matter. First time I did a survey for someone, they said, well, why didn't you ask about the accommodations? I said, is it going to change? They go, oh, that's right, good point. So the point, why waste a question if you're not going to, if you can't or you won't? One person, and I know this person, they had a bad experience at the lodging, but it was a question for the lodging. It wasn't anything that our organization could change, but it would have been a good feedback for the lodging itself. So sometimes you watch where you can affect change as opposed to someone else. And if somebody asks a question, well, why didn't you ask about this? It might be better fit in another place. Okay? In my experiences, my big thing is when you come up with a survey, know that you're going to write a report. Okay? And I think it's a business teacher in me. But do any of you give out paper surveys anymore? Okay, so when you go through, can you recognize people's handwriting?
We make them put their names on it.
Okay, so you...
Unless it's confidential kind of thing, but so that we can keep track of who's returning them back to us.
Mhm.
So, like, we're looking right now for determining if we're gonna offer hot lunch next year.
Oh.
So we have not currently been offering hot lunch, federal food program.
Oh.
Anyway, and so we've actually changed a couple of the questions because we didn't want to lead parents to think that we were offering something that we weren't going to offer. So, but yeah, we are doing it because some of our parents are anti-technology,
Oh,
and so to meet those needs, physically hand out a short
Yeah.
page.
Yep. Well, I used to also do surveys before technology became really big. So we would take in these pieces of paper, and sometimes what happened, or what, I'll put me on it, I would look at it and I would either discount something or I would put more weight on something based on who I knew it came from. And so what you're doing with a report is you're giving statistics, and you're also, when I do a report for Matt, for instance, I give him all the statistics for the 10 questions, and I give him all the answers unedited. You know, if anybody writes things down, I give that to them unedited in a bullet form. But I also give him a front page. And a front page, I talk about how many people filled out, what was the return rate, and then I'll say observations. You know, this really seemed to be a trigger point, or I don't think I'm telling tales out of school, but when they started bringing in the chaplain wives to the conferences, I think the first year none of the chaplain wives had contacted each other outside the conference. The next year, 92%. So now you can show, you know, actual, because you have a report, because you have a written document, you can show trends very easily. So to me, that is very important. It also affects how you ask questions. I got almost into a pickle once because I did a ranking question. And they're very hard to report on, and I did figure it out, but you have to think those things out before, you know, writing a report makes you really think those things out, how is it going to be meaningful to you? How are you going to use that information, whatever it happens to be, but how are you going to use it once you have your information? Know why you're doing a survey. Like I said, we had these people come in and said, we need to do a survey. Well, what about? And they said, I don't know. So you need to know why you're doing a survey. Also, you know, being an instructional designer, they wanted to survey people overseas, and because they were developing a lower level English program. And two of the questions I thought were really important was, what's the educational level of your learners? What's the educational level of your teachers? And they didn't, my organization didn't think that was important. I'm thinking, you don't know if they're pulling the teachers off the street, or, you know, they have PhDs, or are they grammar level? You know, you don't know. But another thing is, I don't use Likert scales. I used them in the past, and my thinking is they do temperature. So you're with each question, you're really getting enthusiasm. I went to an Association for Training and Development seminar in Atlanta, and I listened to the Phillips presentation. He said, you know, it doesn't matter if it's a 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. If you put a 7 down, you know what you're saying, and I know what you're saying. And I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm saying when I say a 7. You know, if I don't know what I'm saying, how do you know what I'm saying? I used to do them on a 5-point scale. I did it in a business school. I had the 1 being bad, the 3 being so-so, and the 5 being great. Well, that gives you a little bit more, but it's still temperature. And what does the 2 and what does the 4 mean? So being, you know, an educator, I want more concrete information than a 1 or 4 or 80% or whatever. I use free electronic applications. Anybody use those? SurveyMonkey, there's a couple of other ones. Google has one. I use them. When I was going to Purdue, I got familiar with SurveyMonkey, so I usually use them. 10 free questions, but 10 questions makes me be disciplined. because I only have 10 questions. What's the most important things I need to know? And how can I get the most information out of one question? So it's a really good discipline, for me anyway. Yes, sir.
Yeah, a quick question. If you don't have them respond to a scale, are they just open-ended questions?
Nope. I'll give you a couple of my examples.
Okay, great, thanks. I'll wait.
So let's go back to the title. There's no chocolate milk in the drinking fountains. You probably have answers like this. That's where you're getting your weird answers, right? Am I correct? Yeah, I used to do that too. So, okay, so here are some of my techniques. So the question is the presenter's presentation. And I have people select as many as apply. So it's not on a scale. And I think of as many things as I can think of, logically, that somebody would respond. So it has an effect on me today. It makes me think how it can affect me tomorrow. It makes me see how to help others. It has had no effect. Don't forget the negative ones, too. Just think of everything. But when I say don't forget the negative ones, that doesn't mean you have to have an equal number of negative ones either. That's, with a liker, you kind of run into that problem too. So I'm just getting feedback on the presenter. How did that affect them? So what you're going to get is you might have people choose 3 of these. But you might have, say, a 54% on it has effect on me today. You might have 30% on it makes me see how to help others. You're going to have some surprising answers when you have these. And what you've done is you've made this all one question. You have thought of every possible answer that they can think of, hopefully. And you have an other just in case you didn't think of it. Didn't think of something. But so it takes a little bit of time to think about what those responses might be. Any questions on that?
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. When you say presenters
Like
presentation, give me an example.
oh, like I would put Mary Hokana's presentation.
And we would answer.
Right. So
We're doing it on you.
right. So that blank is just fill in the blank.
Okay.
So you could put my husband was last hour in this room, so it might say Chaplain Steve Hokana's presentation and fill it out. So, but that's basically what it looks like. So what you've also done is instead of people thinking other and they're thinking about all different kinds of things from the presentation, all you're thinking of is the presenter's whoever it is, blank's presentation. And if none of those apply, at least now they have a template of what you're asking for. So you shouldn't get something that's really wild. Yes, sir.
Wanted or needed qualitative data, kinds of things you would get is 57% of the people said it has an effect on me today.
Right.
Other kinds of, I'm just trying to think, what other kind of graphs, percentages, and charts might we get out of this kind of, and I'm just throwing that out.
Right. For the purposes, for the surveys that I do, that's what it has been helpful. Now, notice that it's select as many as apply. So if only one applies to somebody, then they would only fill out, they would only check one. So they don't have to apply to all of them. It's just the ones that they're feeling. And I guess it is a temperature, but at least it's something that's quantifiable. And you can see, there was one I did, as I was looking at the answers, it really threw me off because I threw the answer in there, but it was, the way I thought of it is it was just a throwaway. But there was a significant response to, I can use this in the future to help others. And this presentation was supposed to be like a one-on-one, dealing with people kind of thing, or dealing with your spouse, or how you get better, or something like that. I really was not expecting somebody to say that it helps me to relate to others. And it was really like 40% said that it helped them to respond. So it wasn't really the main focus of the training, but it was interesting that that was a byproduct. And so you can take that as an educator and go, oh, well, then we can apply this perhaps in the future in another way. The same training, but in another way. So you can draw whatever conclusions you wanted to draw. But it can help you forecast in the future what might be a good program or system. Here's another one. Networking is a big part of your conference or of your training. Have you networked with other teachers, pastors, whatever? And then use the other response to list activities you have used to network. So now what you've done is it's yes or no. Did they network? Yes or no. But then you've really gotten 2 questions in 1 question. So now in the other, it's not just what do you think? No, how did you list your activities? And then in the future, as an educator, you can say, oh, well, people use the coffee time in between. How can we facilitate that? Or we met at dinner and we talked. Well, how can you now facilitate that in the future? So you see how we're taking this information. Yes, you're getting information for today, but I always look forward to what we can do in the future, what's going to be planning for the future. And also looking at the results. Are we achieving more than we thought we were going to achieve? If you look at this comment down here, what we're asking is if people have engaged in an activity on their own. So it's not, coffee clutches, people might see each other that they know and they'll network, but, then on their own, they've also networked with someone else. And then we find out how they're accomplishing it, what they're doing. Now this looks like a wide open question, but it's really not, because first of all, you're telling them that you're really anxious to hear what they have to say. And what you're doing is you're asking specifically, what presenters do you want to see in the future? So again, it's not like, is there anything else you want to tell us about things? No. What presenters do you want to see in the future? I mean, you can always have an all others box, and that can be helpful if it's something that hasn't been included in your other questions. And that can be helpful in a feedback point of view. You can find out where people are thinking. Again, it's going to be a conversation. What do you think is helpful for that conversation with people? Not only this is now you have provided them buy-in. So it's not just you pushing an idea on them for whatever kinds of training that you think are important, but they will give you back ideas on maybe things you hadn't thought of before. And so now you've given them buy-in, now they own it as well. And when you have that ownership, it can be really helpful. But as far as this presentation itself about the chocolate milk and the fountains, you know, you're not asking for that in this question. You're being pretty specific. So, did we cover all these things? If not, tell me what you think we did not cover. Let's see, developing effective surveys. I didn't want to do a whole big thing on surveys because that could take like, people run whole day seminars on how to write surveys. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of what's out there. Matt Champagne's book really changes a paradigm if you were to read it. He'll do things, and I have a survey for you to fill out, and I did fill it out as far as a learning activity for yourself as well, because I did put in a couple of things that Matt, I didn't mention, that Matt does say, is he'll say, tell people how many questions is, how many times have you taken a survey and you press next, and you know that bar goes a little bit. It's like, how much longer is this going to take? Well, Matt says tell them how many questions and how long it's supposed to take. Survey Monkeys told me it's going to take you 2 minutes to fill out my survey. So, you know, you have that ability to do that.
Van.
Did you mention receiving more responses? We have a tiny church, so sometimes if you did a survey, you could get 10.
Well,
and that's the people that put the survey together or something.
Oh.
The leadership committee.
Could we talk a little bit about that, about what do you do to encourage responses? That's kind of A.
Mhm.
B is, do you use paper? Do you do electronic? Do you use a combination of both? And then what's a good result? I mean, is a 63% result a good result, or?
Well,
Yeah.
I asked 3 questions in one.
no, but that's good. I think it depends on your organization, because what's your name? Chrissy said that they have parents who are tech adverse, and so they do paper. It depends on your audience. You could do both, because a lot of these programs will allow you to input data. So you could use the same program, but just input the paper results as well. I have gone to QR codes, like for the chaplains, because they're you know, what, 28 to 50, and so, you know, technology is their bailiwick, really, you know. And in the military, lots of times, even as a civilian, to get your certificate when you finish the class, you had to fill out the survey. So you fill out the survey, you come up to the desk, you give them your survey, and then they give you your certificate. So that's kind of, you know, where they're at. So
in church, it's a donut. If you want the donut.
there you go.
Tell us about QR codes. I'm not familiar.
Okay. QR codes are.
I mean, I know what a QR code
Right,
is.
right.
But I don't
Okay. Do you ever go to like a store and they have the little codes, barcodes under the product?
Yeah.
Okay. I know at Home Depot, if you have their app and you run it, it'll tell you about the product. What with surveys is, I can only speak to Survey Monkeys specifically, but you get done with the survey, you save it, they say, how do you want to distribute it? And so I'll say usually I want a URL, a website address. So they give me a website address, and then they'll ask if I want a QR code. And they'll assign one to me that will send you right to that address.
Okay.
And so then I'll...
Shortcut.
Right, a shortcut, and it's an, so you don't have to type in the website address. I just got the website address for mine just because a QR code on the screen, and you know. But I was telling someone, anybody know what Menards is?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. If you see that they have their comment sheets on a QR code, I suggested that to them. So you'll know that, listen, I got a letter from them saying that they were looking it up. But what they did is, I told them, what you got is greater accountability. I said it'll go right into a database. Your head office will see it as well as the store. You're going to have faster turnaround time. You'll know what's going on faster. And I said, all it takes is for your IT guys to develop a database. And so, yeah, we'll see. So you'll know. Yes, sir.
One thing I appreciate about the QR codes now is that pretty much anybody's smartphone camera automatically will load your website. The survey off of it, you don't need a QR reader like you used to need.
Yep. Yes.
What would you say, like, for principal of the school, so we survey students too, just to kind of see is something we're doing, making an impact, a difference. So, but a lot of ours are yes and no questions. I mean, I feel like we get value from that, like, you know, do you hear about Jesus every day? Yes or no?
But that's
would
what
there be a different way to, other than a yes or no? Or like we do specific things like with our chapel design, like that you have a trusted adult in your, like what we call our faith family. And it's, right now it's a yes or no.
I don't have a problem with yes or no questions, because if you didn't ask yes or no, what would be the alternative? And sometimes there isn't a good alternative. The only thing I would say, you know, the only way you could turn something like that around would be if you did an open, like the presenter's presentation kind of thing, and give them a series of options, and then provide that as well as other things. That might, I mean.
Yeah, because like another one, because we have 7th and 8th graders are kind of leaders, leaders in these small groups, and like the one question is, my faith family helps me be a leader in the school, and it's currently a yes or no.
Well,
should they be given another? I don't know. I guess
well,
that's the other option.
if you go back to this one, that's basically what you're saying with all these options.
Yeah.
You know, every one of these options is really a yes or no.
Yeah.
I do that for Jesus. Was it memorable? Was it useful? Did you like it?
Yeah.
That other text box, they can add, you know, that.
Oh, yes.
You know, to that.
This one?
Yeah, they can add why too, if they feel compelled to say, and this is why I was affected today. Or,
So,
you could ask that question to get better.
It's stemmed from, like, we have the reports that I have to then give of, like, is this current model effective? And so we're basically hoping that, I don't know, it's like 85% of students are, you know, getting something from that particular program.
and I think that that's important too, because it depends on the kinds of reports that you have to report too. Because if that doesn't answer, is not helpful to do your reports, then you don't want to do it that way. 2 of my questions on my survey are yes/no questions. So I'm not, you know, sometimes things are yes, no, true, false.
I think it depends on the development of the kid too, because we do the same thing with our like elementary kids, it's yes or no.
Yeah.
They think yes or no. With middle schoolers, we give them a few more options.
Sure.
We kind of want to engage. I mean, for me, it's more of I'm trying to figure out like relationships between the teachers and the kids and stuff like that. And middle school, I would give them like 4 options, because I really want to know how you feel. You
Yeah.
know? And it's harder for an 8th grader to be like, well, does my teacher treat me fairly? You know?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I want to give them the room to kind of
Mhm.
expand based on where they are developmentally, and I think, like for elementary, you know, or 6th grade, yes or no, because I think they're like that. But
Mhm.
when you hit the middle schoolers, like they want to have that opportunity to go like, yeah, I think so, except for when it comes to homework. You know?
Yeah.
Let's figure out what that means, you know. But it gives me that room.
And then you can follow up on that.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm. And again, you're using that as a conversation.
And our teachers really love it because even if it's anonymous, if you've got most of the kids saying, well, yeah, I know my teacher really loves me, teaches me about Christ, but like is not fair on homework, it really helps those teachers kind of get into the classroom, so they appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, elementary students, a little different story.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
I'm the volunteerism person
Mhm.
for our church. There's a lot of volunteers, and I come to learn how to use surveys to give our volunteers a voice about where, 2 things mainly, what we're doing well, 3, what we're doing well, where we can improve in giving them their volunteer experience, and where they're seeing impact, you know, where they've seen God at work, where their volunteer work has impacted them, or they've seen impact on people they're serving. So if I'm thinking my approach with this would be to work with the individual ministry leader who's brave enough to survey their volunteers, either who came for a big, you know, one-time event that we had where we had 100 volunteers decorating the church.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I hear through the grapevine, someone says, well, you know, yeah, I volunteered to help, but, you know, I showed up at 10 o'clock, like it said, and they weren't ready till 10:30.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing you hear through the grapevine, but most of the people don't complain.
Mm-hmm.
And from my perspective, I need to work then, let's work with the ministry leader, you know, how you can be prepared. Do you need more help from our custodians getting decorations out or something?
Mm-hmm.
But, so instead of just saying what went well, where could we do better, how is the impact, we might put things like, they were ready to start on time. I knew what to do. I had questions and I didn't know who to ask, or those kind of things.
Right, exact-
For the what went well and what didn't, and then a box for other.
Uh-huh.
And then maybe something else then about impact that, and it would be a little bit different for the volunteers who came to the big basketball tournament than volunteers who decorated the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working with the ministry leader to say, what do you want to know, and where could you improve with help from your supervisor or the pastor or the custodians or whoever, so that we're not asking things that they feel there is no control over. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. Sounds like you just made a bigger job for yourself, though.
But it's just huge.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're not, my whole philosophy all along has been, if we're not helping people serve, if we're, because we're busy, if we're unintentional, we never want to get in the way of volunteers, but because we're so busy, if we do things like we're not ready at 10 o'clock when we say show up at 10 o'clock, they're not going to come the next time we ask them to come at 10 o'clock to do the next job. So
Right.
we need a way to get feedback, and people in churches are nice, they don't want to complain.
Yeah.
The next time they just, oh, I'm too busy, I can't help decorate the church.
Yeah.
And they don't tell us why, and through a
Yep.
survey, I'm hoping we can find out.
Seems like you're valuing them too, because you care how the experience went.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, we also hear really good things like, well, you know, yeah, what this little kid said to me when I was teaching Sunday school made my week. I mean, we want to celebrate that. It's good recruitment material for why you want to be a Sunday school teacher.
Yep.
So that to
And-
give them a voice, and that also makes them think of things instead of just, oh yeah, it went fine. Yeah, you know, yeah, they did that, but no, I needed a reminder about, you know, they never told me to bring gloves for the gardening, and,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and everybody else knew to bring gloves when I didn't.
Mhm.
I felt stupid.
Yep. And also, you use the example of a child thanking them. You can also foster that that environment that people compliment each other. And people are nice at church, but sometimes I grew up in a church that was a farming community, and so everybody knew each other. I mean, everybody assumed that the 5 families all intermarried. Not quite my family, but it really is family. And so the responses will be different. So fostering that atmosphere, how you ask questions and what you ask can affect the environment, really. Yes, sir.
You're ranking things, for example, working with a congregation, they're vacant, qualities they want in their pastor. What's the best way to go about that? So that you get a response, because if you put 20 qualities,
Yeah.
people, say, pick your top 5, that's just, so how do you get that kind of, better way of getting that kind of information?
Well, after I had that experience with ranking, I kind of said, I'm never going to do this again. Because it's and right offhand, I don't remember how I resolved it. But it's just a hard question to answer because you're right. You are ranking, and you're ranking. I talked to somebody, or I heard somebody talking recently, and they said when they went to a church, the job description went on for, I think, 20 pages with different tasks. And so they said, so what are the top 10? What are only the things that I can do?
We just went through that process. Seriously, the pastor candidate that the church picked, only Jesus can fill that role. He's got to be good with the kids. He's got to be good with the elderly. He's got to be really outgoing, but not overbearing. I mean, it was like.
Do you do it in such a way, broader, to say, list your top 5 qualities, at the risk of maybe people giving you different words that you can't compile and give an accurate picture? No?
Well, probably the way I would do it is put maybe the first 10 or 20, whatever works, but they're traditionally for that position. If it's a pastor or a teacher or a DCE, what would be the main functions of that? For a pastor, it might be if you do contemporary at your church, comfortable doing contemporary, or if you're doing page 5 and 15. Now I know I'm doing extremes, but if you like 5 and 15, most of us know what that is if we're old enough. That they're comfortable with that. So what are you you can look at your church or at the church and see what kind of qualities are at or where they want to go with a new person. Do you want them to be visiting shut-ins? Do you want them visiting at the hospital? So now you're kind of I don't know that it would just be 10. I don't know. You should probably limit them to the number of choices that they can make, and whatever you think is appropriate. 5 might be a little too few. 10 might be too many, because some people will just go down the list. But as far as the choices, I would just list the primary kinds of things that people in that position would do. A DCE, if you have a preschool program that they need to be able to reach out to the preschoolers, or if high school is really your focus, make sure that they, whatever qualities they need to have to run a high school program, and then have an other, and hopefully that's only one other that they put. Yes, ma'am.
So for a school survey, and if you've had experience with those of you that are in the room, is it better to be extremely general for parent satisfaction survey, or is it, like if you can say if you're satisfied with your teacher, well, obviously, then you want to know what grade level. I'm early childhood director, a lot of people know the two's teacher, the fourth teacher, So is it better to do a separate survey for each grade level, or make the questions more?
Well, you could also have an identifier for which class that they're answering for. So then that would simplify your job as far as having one survey maybe, and then you have that identifier.
So I did that when I did a paper survey. I would do like a different color, or I just put a little mark at the bottom. I ran it off so I remembered, okay, that mark was for this class or whatever. But can you do that like on Survey Monkey, or you would just say you mean?
That would be one of the questions.
What's your class?
Like what I do for math is the first question is my branch of service. So this time I started with active Air Force, active Army, active Navy, Reserve Air Force, Reserve Army, Reserve Navy, and went down through that. And so not that I still don't know exactly who wrote it, but if it makes sense that they're going to bring a different point of view, because all the different branches of the military have a different point of view, a different way of approaching things, and you're going to have that with all your teachers or the parents in your different classrooms. And so what that will do is SurveyMonkey will allow you, if you can go to that question, and they will, you can look for the responses for that, the person that responded that way. But, if you're going to talk about, how many different classes are you talking about? I might just do different surveys for each class. It would simplify things, because you are trying to be specific, and you are trying to gather the data for each particular classroom. So I probably would just do different surveys. This is the same survey, but different places for them to go to fill them out.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? You said not the 1 to 5, because if you say something like, I feel like this is a safe and secure building, or something about the environment, it's better to just do yes or no than saying
Well,
1 to 5?
the 1 to 5 is just my thing, because
Or should you like put in words, yes, sort of, or something?
Could you change it to where do you feel safe or unsafe?
well, that's an
Because
idea.
Maybe they feel safe, but not in the bathrooms or something like that.
You could say, yeah, that's an idea. You could have a list of places where you feel safe, lists of places where you feel unsafe. No, I hear what you're saying, because you're trying to get a temperature of how safe they feel.
Could you follow that one up with like an explain answer?
You could.
Because if they said it to you, then they might say, it's because I've been able to walk in the building without, somebody stopping me. That
Right.
might be, then that's why they rated it a 2 versus they say 5.
Right.
Because everything that I want from them, I want to know the temperature,
Right.
How good is communication? Is it satisfying to you? Communication from the office, from the teachers, from...
Well, as far as that question, you could say, I feel there's communication from, and then list all those places. And, you know, partially with that conversation is, you know, personally, yeah, I'm a survey taker, and I get bored taking surveys if they're too long. And so that's why I've gone to doing something like this. I try to make it as easy as possible, as short as possible, as fast as possible. So you're asking a lot of good questions, and those are good questions to ask on a survey. My point of view is, how can you consolidate them into something so that people aren't answering every single question, yes or no, yes or no? Because to me, sometimes it gets irritating. Have you ever felt that? You know, like, so I have found that having questions like this tells me a lot more. But you could do a temperature. You could have a question like, list of places where I feel comfortable, and then have a Likert scale for a temperature. How comfortable do I feel? Or I feel this comfortable. You know, very good, awful. And that would, but that would be a good temperature question. That, I just think that Likert, that's all they're. When I worked for the Air Force, our surveys were Likert. And my boss had to really think about how he could use that 1 to 5 survey to give a statistic. So what is performing well? Is it, so if the average is 4s, really, is that 80%? So is that a B? Is that successful? Where is your compliance line? And so that's that's my thinking. Where do I come into what becomes appropriate? Is a 3, is that a C, or is that failing? You know, so 6, I mean.
Or is it really good?
Yeah, is it?
You know, and we have to higher.
Is it? Yeah, so is it like, you know, the curve, or so it would be average, or is it failing? So you just have to think that through before you get the survey, is all I'm saying. Yes, sir.
In the church I'm at, last year we did a survey that was developed by a consultant to gauge the satisfaction with our elementary school from our parents. And he used a Likert scale on that, and the standard he used was that if your result was less than 4, that area is in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you have to determine that before you do. You can't do that when you're trying to create your report or trying to draw conclusions. And that's why I think it's important to write a report. Because now, when you say that, if you get a 4 and it needs help, then everybody who needs to know knows that that's a 4 and it needs help. Instead of, well, I feel that, no, now you've got it concrete. And you have documentation, so if you do the survey next year or in 5 years, you can go look back and how did we improve, how did we not improve. But that is part of my thing too, is you have to think ahead of time how you write the questions, and with that in mind, how are you going to report your answers?
It's like that. Wouldn't you also need to make sure the person taking the survey would be aware of what their response might show, because maybe they are not the type to give 5s out very often, and you know, so
exactly.
They need to also know where the answer fits on that scale.
Well, some people 5 is, you know, perfect. Well, nobody's perfect. I don't give anybody perfect. So what does 4 mean? So you see, that is the issue I have with the Likert scale. And like I said, the guy said, you write a 7, I know what a 7 is. No. Yes, sir.
Would it help clarify that issue if you labeled what the 5 meant, like a strongly disagree, strongly agree kind of opinion temperature questions?
That helps, but I think if you really want clarity, you label each single one of them.
I'm sorry.
You label, if it's a 5-point scale, then you label all 5 of them.
Yes, well, that's
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
strongly disagree.
Yeah.
That's labeled.
Yeah.
I guess, I just think there are times when taking a temperature is what you want to do.
The only thing with that, like I said, with that, in the organization I worked at, so if somebody agreed, but they didn't strongly agree, but they were neutral,
That's successful.
so what kind of value do you give that so that it means something to you?
Yeah, I'm in favor of not having a neutral. It's, like a 4 points.
Right.
Agree or disagree, and to what degree.
Jim Kirkpatrick talks about that. He calls that sitting on the fence. He doesn't want anybody sitting on the fence. So he thinks you should have an even number. So I gave you the resources. They have a lot of good stuff on there. I'm not on Kirkpatrick as much as I'd like, and I've read Matt's book, so can you tell this is my thing? But anyway, that's the survey. If you want to fill it out, it's 5 questions. SurveyMonkey tells me it should take you 2 minutes. So, any other questions? Thank you very much. I hope you got something. Oh, forgot about that. We were talking about chocolate milk, right? Does anybody want some chocolate milk?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, let's.
I'm good. Oh,